Good morning,
Good
Gloria
morning.
Day. It's the 9th of October 2001, and I just want to say thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for the Hospice History Project.
It's my pleasure.
So, would you mind starting by telling us where you were born and when you were born?
Right. Well, I could almost say I have a claim to fame when you ask, where I was born. I was born in Sheffield, in an area called Totley, and I was famous at that time for being the first war baby in Totley, and that was the 8th of September 1939, and war had been declared on the 3rd. So I in fact was the first war baby born in that area. It's my claim to fame.
And what did your parents do?
My dad at that time was in the Air Force. My mum obviously wasn't working, she had 2 other children, and I was about to be born at the start of the war. Very grim time, really difficult. My dad had been in the Auxiliary Air Force for some time, and he literally went away to camp and was then kept at camp because war was declared, or about to be declared. So it was really quite a difficult time, for my parents. That, my dad was there in the Air Force, away from my mum, and I think he got a very short spot of leave just to come and see after I was born, just to come and see me after I was born. So it was quite a very tough time.
And do you remember anything about the war years?
Yeah, quite a bit. I remember my dad returning home. That's quite vivid, because that was really hard to have not seen someone really for about 4 or 5 years, for any length of time. So, a stranger returned. I remember that very vividly. I can remember staying with an aunt and my grandmother and being hidden under a table because of the bombs dropping and things like that, and always being aware that you've got to be careful and, be prepared to suddenly dive under tables and articles of furniture for protection. But although I was aware of things like that, I also, had a lovely childhood as well. I had a very easy, relaxed, very poor, but a nice childhood as well. Got, very good mum and a very good aunt who actually was a nurse. So I'll probably tell you a bit more about that as time goes on.
Did your mum have to do any work during the war?
Yeah, she did. We went to a local nursery, and my mum had to work on a milk float, with that was driven by a horse. It was a horse and like cart. So she did that as part of the war effort, that women had to then go out to work. I don't think she wanted to, and I don't suppose she wanted to put us in the nursery, but she really had no alternative. And then my grandmother was a major figure to us as well. She helped to look after us in between times if my mum worked at other different times. So I suppose, looking back, it was a very, very tough time for people. But there was a lot of, kind of resilience and people just getting on with life and coping, and because they got to, they'd no choice. They had no choice.
How old were your brothers and sister?
I had 2 brothers older than me, one a year older, one 2 years older, and then a sister was born about 18 months, so my dad must have popped home on leave at some time, and my sister was born probably about 18 months after I was. And then we had 2 children were born much later on to my parents, in their kind of early 40s.
So the war was over when you were about 6
5.
then? 5.
Yeah.
And
6.
were you just starting school at that time?
I was, yes. That was a hard time because I went to a Catholic school. My mum was Roman Catholic, and we had to go to a Catholic school. The school had actually been bombed, so we were put into what then was very temporary accommodation. The Catholic schools at that time got no help whatsoever from the state.
Which school was it?
It was a school called St Wilfrid's. The teachers tried really hard to give us the best education that they could. They were really quite splendid, I used to think. And 1 or 2 of the teachers I kept in touch with, right into my late teens, early 20s. A particular favourite teacher of mine I kept in touch with into my 40s, I would say, and actually I lost contact because of her dying. They really tried hard in the most awful circumstances, very little help. They just did the best they could. You can imagine the school had been bombed, the original school, so I think they cobbled something together and just made the best of it. I think probably the saddest thing is that education then, for particularly the schools I went to, was in such a state of flux that I think we were always, sadly, just a little bit behind with things. So I know when I came to take my 11 plus, I don't think we were then up to standard. So I never knew anyone from our school actually go to grammar school. I never knew anybody. I was fortunate I was given a second chance later on, and I felt that, you know, I was very, very lucky for that, really.
Which school did you go on to then?
I didn't. I stayed
you stayed in
but then they started. Well, I went to work when I finished school. I'd always thought from being a very small child I would like to be a nurse. That was always. I didn't know how I could do that. I didn't really know. So initially I was encouraged, you know, right, start work, and I actually went to work in one of my favourite places of all time, and still is. The association that I had with this particular thing was music. I just adored music. So I went to work in a record shop. So it absolutely fulfilled everything I'd ever dreamt of, in a way, apart from nursing.
Where was the record shop?
Philip Cann's at Dixon Lane, very well known shop, especially in Sheffield, very well known. And I just plodded along for a few months, and then just by chance, a lady that was working at the shop, who actually handled all the classical music section of the shop, very bright, very dynamic lady, very intelligent, said she'd seen an article in the paper that they were starting a new scheme in Sheffield for like a pre-nursing school, a college type situation. And she said to me, here's your chance. And I thought, yes, she's right. So I applied to the pre-nursing school, as it was called, and was accepted. Maybe I can say again, I was more grateful to one of my teachers again at this point, because when I went for the interview, which was a very, I'm just trying to think of the right word, you know, a very correct interview. I'm sorry, I'm not very good with words this morning. You know, you were before a panel, you had to take an entrance exam, but when they actually interviewed me with the panel, the comment was made was that alone the reference that I had received from this particular teacher would have got me in, which I thought was, I mean, I'd still to academically prove myself, and I did. You know, obviously I was accepted, much to my amazement and relief, really. And I was 16 then, so started at like a nursing college, really. I think there's still a very similar thing going on. And that involved so many days at college with subjects like anatomy and physiology, sciences, etc. And then you worked at hospital so many days, so you saw both aspects. You had to do the academic bit and the practical bit of working in departments within a hospital type situation. Really good, really excellent. And of course, fulfilled my dream. You know, I thought, you know, this is it. I'm going to be a nurse, and that was it. I just then plodded on with. We took then what was a preliminary type exam to get into nursing, to really start. You know, have formal training. Did that, passed that, and then started formal training.
So when you were a pre-nurse, at which hospitals did you work in?
The Children's Hospital, the Royal Hospital in Sheffield, the Royal Infirmary, Fulwood Annex, a variety of hospitals we were available to go and work in. And they were then classed under the United Sheffield Hospitals. Very prestigious, very prestigious. So I felt that I'd been very fortunate, really.
How did your parents feel about you going into nursing?
They didn't want me to. Initially they didn't want me to. They thought it was very hard work. that it would have been a lot easier to go into secretarial work that was nice and safe, and they just didn't see nursing as an attractive option at all, that it was going to be exhausting and tiring, and the hours were endless, the money was exceedingly poor. And I can only use a word now that I just thought, you know, and people have said to me, you're dedicated, isn't it? Well, they were right, because I felt that I wanted to be dedicated, that whatever opposition my parents put before me, I just ignored and got on with it.
And did they actually oppose you and try and...
No. They just expressed the feelings and just said they thought I was wrong to pursue it. But I just said to them, I'd always been a little bit self-willed. I think I was the most self-willed child in the family. And I just said, well, I'm just going to do it. And I just thought I'd got this opportunity, which almost seemed like heaven sent. You know, it was just so amazing that things fell into place after what I considered a very tough education. And yet, my teachers gave me other things. You know, a lot of them were very talented with art and things, and a love of music. And so they gave me other aspects. It might not have been formal type education in some ways. But, you know, they were good, solid people. And I thought, well, I've just been given this chance, you know, I've got to make it work. So I just got on with it.
What do you think influenced you when you were younger that made you want to be a nurse?
My aunt.
It was your aunt?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. She was, actually, she always looked nice in a uniform, which was, I suppose, one advantage. And then I was very aware when I was younger. She was very, very helpful to the family because of the war. And she actually earned a salary because of nursing, a regular salary. And actually she would come along and when my mum had no money at all, you know, things were so hard. People have no idea really today how tough they were. And she'd simply, you know, draw a salary, throw it in the middle of the table and just say, well, let's do the best we can. So I'd always heard these stories, and I had a lot of contact with her throughout her, like, she was then a 20-year-old, 30-year-old working nurse. She was always seemed very professional, always very much in control. You know, it just seemed she was quite a perfect person in a lot of ways. And I thought, probably I could aim for that. You know, I could be as good as she was. So I always just thought she was just so wonderful. And I knew she helped people, because I was very aware that she helped people. I'm very aware of that. So, you know, that was another aspect.
And so when you started training, did what you imagined nursing to be, did it live up to it?
It probably was better, I think. Oh, it was tough. It was very, very tough because we were very young. Maybe on my first day I saw death, and it wasn't a pleasant death. It was someone who had been very badly burned. So the smell alone on the ward was very difficult to cope with. And yet, it's funny because I've always said I developed a nose that shuts off. I'm really lucky. I never really smelled. I mean, I do smell things, offensive things, and then I make my nose stop smelling it. So it's a big advantage. I don't know how I do that. I can't tell anybody, Michelle, how I do it, but I do it. And that has been a big advantage in my life. So my first day was tough. All kinds of things, horrendous things happened on my first day as well, like I spilt a bucket of water in front of a consultant. I was banging the bin lids and that we put, you know, dirty dressings into, and the sister came along and said, couldn't I try a little bit harder to make some more noise? Because I was obviously making a lot of noise. And I really thought, after my first day, I thought, well, that's it. I shan't bother coming back tomorrow because I've just done so many things wrong. But I did cope, and the ward sister did say to me as I was leaving, I shall see you tomorrow. So I thought, that was quite a surprise.
They invited you back.
She invited me back. So I thought, oh, well, I'll turn up then tomorrow. And, you know, that was how things developed. It was hard, though. But, yes, it did live up to my expectations. I realised very quickly that you could make a difference to people. You could either help them to cope well. Your attitude and interest in people would either help them to cope well with hospital or not cope at all. And I knew I could help them to cope well. I knew I could. I knew there was something within myself that would help them. And I don't want that to sound big-headed, I just knew it. I just felt just something that I'd got that would help. And it's a lovely feeling. I've still got it now. I still have that feeling now. I know I can make a difference.
What did you gravitate towards during your training? Was the one part of it that you enjoyed?
Yes, I can't say one thing because I enjoyed everything. I was lucky to work within a hospital area that did a lot of specialities like neuromedicine, plastic surgery, first first dialysis. They weren't doing kidney transplants, they weren't even heard of. But I was part of, first dialysis type thing. Very, very basic indeed. But there it was. Everything starts basic, doesn't it, if you think about it.
Which year did you start training then?
1957 to 61. And
in the same hospitals as your pre-nursing?
Oh yes, yes, within the United Sheffield hospitals. And I was lucky, so you did like a little bit of everything. And probably, one of the things which later was very helpful, when I was at the Children's, they were doing a lot of intervention with spina bifida children. And although it distressed me when my time at the Children's at the time, especially if they were dying and so little and vulnerable, bless their hearts, but I had quite a lot of involvement with spina bifida children. They were putting shunts in then, and that was very new. Again, very dynamic stuff. They were starting to operate on spina bifida children, and I didn't realise at the time, but that would help me with a job in later years, much later. But I probably enjoyed everything that I did. There's no particular speciality. I like surgery. I like medicine. I like the burns. I liked everything, whatever I did. I can never honestly say there was something I didn't like because I liked it all. It just fulfilled something in me, the whole spectrum of nursing. I like talking, especially. That was never a problem to talk to patients.
Which brings me to the next question. How was the social life when you were a nurse?
Oh, excellent. Really, really excellent. You're 18, you're young, you're vibrant, you're having a wonderful time. You work so hard. So what you did is we played hard as well. And it opened, of course, socially it opened a new kind of area of my life, is that I'd come from a very fairly poor background, very ordinary background, and suddenly I was surrounded by people who'd had probably very good education, been to university, lots of girls that I actually trained with had been to private schools, boarding schools, so I just saw different aspects of life in a lot of ways. And I don't know, because of the fact that I was a very happy-go-lucky person and very into things, and I loved to dance, I loved a social life, the medical students tended to always be after me to say, can we arrange a party, can we sort so and so. So really I was very instrumental in a lot of parties happening, and probably things that shouldn't have happened, but that was beside the point. So really it opened, my social life was splendid, amidst a lot of hard work. I was always aware of the commitment I had to patients in the hospital. So I realised that, then of course you didn't rely on drugs and things like that to keep you going. You relied on the sheer love of life. And that just got me through, that if I had a very late night, early morning, and my father was such that you still got up for work no matter what.
So you lived at home, you didn't go to the nursing?
I went to the nursing home for a year, and then you got an option of going back home. And because of financial things with my parents, I went back home. I really wanted to stop in the nurse's home, but I felt obligated to help my parents with the very small salary that I received. But they never begrudged my social life. They were absolutely excellent.
What did your brothers and sister go on to do? Were they at home?
Two brothers went in, there was national service then, and they went into national service. My sister, who was very artistic, went to what was a greeting card house, and she used to decorate greeting cards. Very, very artistic, beautiful. Really the stuff that she did produce was really excellent. And that's what she wanted to do. She simply wanted to do that. My two brothers, one went into mining because he'd always done caving and climbing, and he wanted to continue to go down holes. So he went into mining, which I think my parents weren't very pleased about, but he wanted to do that, and that was it. But he still did his national service. Another brother went to work at a bakery. And then the two that were born later, much later, one of my other brother actually went into nursing. He followed me into nursing.
So two of you in the family.
Well, no, 4. My son followed me into nursing, and my nephew followed me into nursing. Yeah, 3 fellas, no girls. You know, quite amazing, really. Yeah.
So when did you qualify?
I qualified 1961. Yeah, 61.
And did you get a job straight away?
Oh yeah, no problem. In fact, it amazed me. I was offered loads of jobs, just offered loads. Sisters wanted me to go back on their ward, just loads. I'd really the pick of the hospital. It was really nice that so many people wanted me to work for them. And I chose to work on a medical ward, which I'd known very well, and I'd really liked. And they were developing, I knew, the renal unit. There were some very dynamic consultants working. There was a professor working then, Stuart Harris, a very famous man of his time. And I just chose to work with that particular ward. But I had loads of offers. Jobs were not a problem at all.
Which hospital was that in?
That was at the Royal Hospital, the old Royal Hospital on West Street. Lovely hospital, lovely.
And what sort of patients were you seeing in the medical ward?
Lots of chest problems, because Sheffield was an area where you got chest problems. So there was a variety, kidney problems, all aspects. Probably with more another diabetic one, but you get the odd diabetic. In fact, we had quite a well-known consultant who was a diabetic, and he was always shoved onto the ward because we could make him behave. And I'd known him for some time, so I used to make him behave, you know. There was just a variety of medical problems, really. But mainly, if anything, chest and kidney, that kind of thing.
So can you tell me how your career progressed from that point then?
I got married in 1961. Got married in 1961. I went it off, you nearly forget, it's so long ago. And my husband was very desperate to have children. He was older than me. And he really did want children, and that was the criteria that we got married on. Well, I mean, he loved me, I know that, but he really did want children. So that was very much, we didn't actually avoid having children. So I think within 14 months of getting married and staffing, you know, being a staff nurse, I was expecting my first child, which we were very happy about. So I then left. I'm hoping I can remember all this. I then left work to have, you know, my first baby, and then wanted to really stop at home. I thought it'd be really nice to, you know, give him plenty of time and attention, which I did. Super baby, absolutely wonderful. So I didn't get involved with work really. I might do the odd thing if people would ask me if people knew that I was in a lot of people knew about, you know, my nursing career and things. And if anybody was needing somebody to sit at night or help out a little bit with a bit of nursing, they'd often ring me and ask if I would do that. And I did odd times of that. But basically I was at home caring for my husband and a baby. And then we planned a second child, which was really nice. It was ever so convenient. I think I got, you know, when we were thinking about having, when I got pregnant, like maybe 3 months later, which was super. We were absolutely delighted, and delighted to get a second boy. So that was really nice. But my husband had taken over a family business which went out of, which went bust because of it was, you know, no longer needed. An old traditional family business, and things were becoming modernised, so it was no longer needed. So financially things were disastrous. So I thought, I'm no alternative, I must go back to work. I must, you know, get back to work. And I rang to make an appointment to see my ex-matron, who was a delightful lady, an MA, absolutely splendid woman. And I went and I thought, well, I'll ask her if there is any jobs available. And, you know, people always said, oh, you know, you'll be years before you get back into nursing and this, that and that. And I think I went to see her on the Friday. I explained my situation, that I needed some part-time work. And I thought, well, she'll say, well, come back in a year or two. And she just said, can you start on Monday? And I did. I started that, just doing part-time evenings so that my family wouldn't suffer. I could see the children virtually almost to bed. And then my husband took over. I mean, he was excellent. So I started evenings. I did some odd nights as time went on. And I worked all over the hospital. I mean, I did everything then. I would work anywhere, particularly medical wards, surgical wards, whatever. It was no problem. I just got on with it. So that was really good. I got back into nursing, really. And then I was thinking, I think I went then up to work at a hospital a little bit closer to where I lived, and that was a unit that dealt with gynae and babies.
Sorry, carry on.
So I went to work there for a while. I'm hoping I'm getting this right. You know, you almost forget how, you know, what happened in sequence. But I did that, and then I think I kept thinking again. That was for nights I was doing. Because that was convenient. That meant that I could see the children to bed. I could then go off to work. The only person to suffer at that time was me, because I was working on social hours. But, you know, with my husband's support and family support, I really was able to cope and didn't feel that anybody missed out. Most of all, the children. That went on for a while, and then I think I went back then to my original hospital, thinking the kids were just starting school. So I thought, oh, I could do a little bit more work. I could probably take on more. So for a very short period of time, I went back to my own original hospital. And I think I'd once applied to go on the district, but we had there was a superintendent that ran the district, splendid lady, who said, your children are too young, you know, but so I'm sorry, apply in a few years' time, carry on with your hospital work, you're doing all right, but apply it when your children are a little bit older. So that was fine. I was quite happy with all that I was doing and all that I had done. And then I got a call from this lady one day, and I thought, strange, you know, calling me. And she said, I seem to remember on your CV that you have worked with spinal bifida children in the past, and that is quite unusual. So I said, oh, you're right, Miss McGonigal, I did. I said, oh, it's a little while ago. So she said, well, there's a local school open very close to where you live, and they've lost one of their nurses, the sisters, and the girl who's running the place has got 60 children to care for, and she's desperate for a break, desperate. She hasn't had a day off for probably 6 or 8 weeks. Would you be prepared to go and give her a break? So I thought, well, why not, poor girl. I felt a bit sorry. I thought, oh God, you know, poor girl. So off I trotted to this school. Meanwhile, of course, I was still doing my own job at the hospital, and I walked into this very nice school. Delightful girl, absolutely worn out. She introduced me to some of the children, and I thought, oh, they're just gorgeous. And these were kids. When I looked at some of the names, I'd actually nursed, you know, like years previously. So I thought, good heavens above, this is amazing. And, you know, I said, oh, I know some of these kids. You know, they had shunts put in and various surgical situations done while I was, you know, looking after them. And she said to me, you know, I'm just desperate for a break. I said, I'm sure you are. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come on Saturday and let you go out for the day and just have a day off. Because she did a 24-hour call situation. So I went on the Saturday. I told her just to clear off for the day and I would cope. I mean, we've got doctors' numbers, you know, local GP looked after the kids. And a lot of the children went home for the weekend anyway, so it was a little bit quieter. Had a super weekend, you know, super day. And I just, when she came back, she said, well, I know you're working part-time, aren't you? You know, and I don't expect you could do anything more. But she said, you know, do you think you could manage it? I said, absolutely. I'll be here next weekend. In fact, if you like, I'll do Saturday and Sunday. You know, my husband won't mind. I'm sure he'll fit in. He does realise things are tough. So I did that for, you know, a little bit of time elapsed. And then the headmaster actually approached me one day and said to me, would you consider coming to work here on a permanent basis? Well, it actually involved living in. You had to live in, so to move all your family as well, lock, stock and barrel, to do 24-hour call. I went to talk it over with my husband, and he was very keen. He just thought it would be a nice career step in a way, something I enjoyed doing, kids I could cope with, my family could move with me, my 2 children and my husband could move into a glorious flat that was allocated. I really didn't know what to do, and then the lady from the district, Miss McGonigal, the superintendent, rang me and tried to persuade me slightly, and she said, I'll tell you what, for however long you do it, when you finish, I promise you a place on the district. So I must admit, Michelle, any jobs that have arisen for me, I've been handed. You know, I've been actually given them. I've never really applied for much because people have been there in the wings saying, would you like to do? And I've said, oh, I would. And that's been it. I've just kind of fallen from one job to the next.
So your family were quite happy to up
Oh,
sticks
yes,
and move
yes.
house?
Well, we rented our house. My brother was needing to rent a house for a while, so he rented our house. And we moved into this flat. I did say at the time I would only do it for a 2-year period because I thought it was very demanding. It wasn't really fair on probably my family to have such a demanding job. But I did get the school holidays, which were an absolute bonus. And it was in the area where we lived. So my boys still went to the same school, they still had the same friends, but they'd also got these 60 kids to play with as well. And that was fun. I had 2 years of absolute fun. 2 years of worry as well, because these kids were very ill at times, exceedingly ill. They got urine infections and other infections from operations that they'd had. But they were just so delightful.
What support did you have with them?
How do you mean?
Well, because they were so ill.
None. You did it yourself.
You couldn't call on anybody in
Oh, well, you called on a doctor, or we took them to the hospital, but we made all the decisions. And it was up to us to keep those children alive and fit and well.
Gosh.
And so we just did it. There were 60. It was tough. But I loved it. It was just, for me, an absolute challenge. And the girl I worked with was delightful. She actually married and then had a baby, say, a year later. And then another girl came along. And she was equally delightful. So I worked with superb colleagues. I had 2 SENs that worked for me. And one of them was just an absolute scream. So we laughed from morning till night. I mean, the place was just superb. Teachers were a bit hard to handle at times because they were very much into wanting to teach while, you know, these children had a lot of medical problems. So they often had to be taken out of school into our area. And sometimes, I know it was hard for the teachers, but we got along pretty well. On the whole, it was all right, but certainly they needed a lot of medical attention. But it was just a great 2 years. And then I decided after 2 years that was right, I must move on. And I rang Miss McGonigal, on the district superintendent, and she said, oh, Gloria, you've done your 2 years then? Right, you want to start Monday? And that was it. I just went then onto the district. And I can't remember how many years, 6 or 8 years I had on the district, I think. And I always say I was really lucky because I just got the worst district in Sheffield. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Which one?
Well, I used to do the Park Hill, which a lot of people that live in Sheffield will recognise these areas. Hyde Park, Wyburn, Woodthorpe, Manor. Absolutely horrendous areas.
But at that time, was that when Park Hill had just been built?
Yeah,
So it was very new.
yes, it was pretty new. Lovely, wonderful areas, superb. I always said it was one of the best times of my life. Although I'm saying that, because they're all the best times of my life. When I look back, they're all the best times of my life. But it was a good time. As a nurse, you were held in very high esteem by the local populace. They were just splendid people, very ordinary, down-to-earth, hard-working. Some were villains, but that was beside the point. I always had a brand new car, and I always could claim my car was never touched. Never as much as a pinprick. If they saw the district that they knew you nursed the grandmother, mother, daughter in families. You just covered the whole spectrum of care. And they were just, the patients were just quite splendid.
What were the main social issues in those areas at that time?
Great deprivation, poor housing often, because there were still a lot of houses back to back, toilet down the yard type things, very poor housing. People would have jobs, the pay was disgraceful, what some of the people would be, for the hours that men worked and the pay that they got was truly disgraceful. So there was great deprivation, a lot of social issues, lack of, obviously it's in some ways education, very poor parenting skills and things like that. But there were equally, to match that, there were good parenting skills and there were good social little areas where people would keep a little house immaculate, really excellent. But generally it was a very socially deprived area, so it was tough. And you'd go into houses where, people were in prison and things like that. And they were really struggling to make ends meet. But there was always a cup of tea for the district nurse, always a welcome, always a warmth to people, because they knew he'd come to help. You knew he'd come to try and make their life a little bit better. But it was a grim area at that time.
Was this the late 60s?
Yes, 70s, beginning at 70s, early 70s.
So I suppose...
late 60s, early, yeah.
There was still a lot of steel employment, at least.
Oh, yes,
then.
yes,
So
big miners. Oh, yes, all that was still very intact.
Yeah.
Yeah, very intact. But, the pay was atrocious that the men would get, for a 12-hour, 14-hour shift. They just worked so hard for very little reward, really. And I was very aware of that. I was made very aware and felt very sorry for some people, how they really struggled. But as well, some people didn't want to, they didn't want to get on or attain anything in particular. They just wanted to live and go to bingo and have a packet of cigarettes and a pint of beer at night. And that was sufficient, Times were very simple then, really. And people were satisfied, very easily satisfied. And you just accepted that, really. But it was a great time for me, a great time.
Were any of the illnesses that you were treating related to their jobs? Or?
Yeah, lots, you see, especially with mining, steelworks, chest problems, big chest problems again. But then again, I'd nursed those when I was kind of a staff nurse, newly qualified staff nurse. So it was nothing unusual. Operations, which then, involved, often massive surgery. Not like you'd get the keyhole today, so you got huge abdominal wounds and various things. You'd get the old lady who'd had leg ulcers for 12 years, never had a bath for 12 years, only a stand-up one at the sink because she hadn't got a bath, and things like that. Or, literally, there were things like they kept the coal in the bath, and that was true. When you hear about things like they did. Mm-hmm. So, the bath wouldn't be used for bathing. It's used to store some of the extra coal that they got. So it was a very unusual time. Very unique, I used to think, in a lot of ways. I loved it. I really loved it.
Why unique?
I don't know, it just was. People were very satisfied with things and satisfied with a lot. Like today, they've got so much and yet they're still not satisfied. And yet then they were just it was their lot in life and that was it. You couldn't attain anything higher. Some people could and knew they could and did, but a lot of people just accepted that that's how it was and to just get on with it. And housing around that area was quite poor, you see. As I say, a lot of back-to-back houses. Then some of the estates started to really be built and people actually got bathrooms and inside toilets, which was quite a novelty for some people. Great, I would think.
Were you coming across terminally people?
Yes. Now that's a strange thing because I didn't always cope very well. I knew I had a great lack then within myself. There were many times I just had some very sad experiences that made me feel exceedingly sad. Can I quote just one gentleman? I nursed a gentleman for a long time who had got a primary of lung. Super wife, absolutely wonderful. They never talked together, and I didn't know how I could. I didn't know then. I had no expertise in the case. I've seen a lot of people die and a lot of things happen, but this man just somehow stands out. He and his wife never shared. They just kept the distance, but he continued to nicely go along and carry on with this dying. And I can remember I always avoided being left alone with him because I had a strange feeling he would challenge me. So I made sure that I always met up with my SEN and we did him together. So I was never alone in the room. And till one day I arrived a little bit earlier and his wife said, "Oh, Gloria, he's in bed. Can you take his coffee up?" And I made the mistake, or so I thought, of actually going upstairs on my own. And we just generally chatted for a very brief time. And then he said, "Gloria, I feel I must make a comment to you or I must discuss something with you." And I got really, hot under the collar. I could feel, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. And I thought, he's really going to say something about his illness. And he said, "You and I have been really good friends since the day that we met." He said, "I've admired you a lot." He said, "But there are times now when, you're letting me down." So I said, "Why is that?" I was like, "Why?" Because I always thought my nurse, I tried to keep my nursing at the very top of the tree. I was always very good. My patients had everything. They had everything. Whatever they had it. And I made sure that happened. And I thought, is he challenging, mine? And he went on to say that I avoided discussing what his problem was. And at first I blustered and said, "Oh, but I'm always here." And he said, No, you're missing the point. And he more or less said to me, "Sit down, girl, I want to have a proper talk with you." And he really told me how he felt about things that, in fact, he realised I avoided confrontation. He realised that I always came with my colleague Barbara so that I didn't have to speak to him. Oh, God, I just felt terrible. I felt dreadful. And all that he said, in the nicest way, was true. Everything he said, every comment he made, was absolutely right. So I actually had to say to him, "You're right, you're absolutely..." And I have no excuse, I just don't know what to say. Just that I'm afraid, And he's just said to me, "Well, right, from now on, let's go forward," And I just thought, what a splendid man to be able to bring that out into the open, that I hadn't the courage. I mean, I'd had training, but funnily enough, not training to deal with death. I'd had no training for that. We were just expected to get on with it. So he taught me actually a vital lesson. So things for me, from then on with him, it was wonderful. His death was quite splendid as time went on. I felt I was never afraid again. He just kind of opened a door for me. And I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe the difference he made, being honest. So that was really, a help to me.
It's interesting what you say, there was no training for death in the hospitals.
No.
So how did they deal with death?
They didn't very well. No, you just kind of, you got on with laying somebody out. You were respectful. I was always respectful. I was always aware of, that you must show respect because I remember my first ward sister leading me to the entrance to the ward and saying, "Look at that bed, someone was in it." She said, "That could be your mother or your father. Treat that person accordingly." So that was kind of what I'd lived by. But death was just something else. It was almost like to be ignored. It was pushed in a corner. It was pushed in a side ward. It was pushed out of the way. Nobody ever really... And relatives came and they seemed to be grieving a lot. I was often in a position where probably I didn't see the relatives. Or if I did, it was, "Well, give them a quick cup of tea." And you say, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And then just get out of the way, goodbye and farewell. And it all seemed very haphazard and not very... And if they were crying, there were times when, my compassion would be there. I would feel, and I'd be saying, "Oh, please don't cry, please don't get upset." But I didn't know what to say after that. I just didn't know what to say. So it was often left with, well, here's the certificate and goodbye then. And that was it. I can remember feeling anger at times when I was in casualty once and they brought in a very young road traffic accident who was dead. And we had to see the girlfriend and the father. And I remember the father making a comment to the girlfriend, and I could have thumped him, and I thought, there is something more than this. And he said, like, oh, you'll get over it. And I thought, no, you can't possibly get over something like this. You can't. And I felt I wanted to thump him, this man. And I knew then, you know, there were incidents that happened that made me realise I didn't cope. But I knew I wasn't alone. Neither did anybody else. We'd sometimes talk to colleagues and they'd say, oh, I felt awful, I gave that person nothing, gave that family nothing, I felt... And I used to think, there must be something more that we could do. So one lesson was this man. It really, really made me take stock of where I was at and what I was doing and how I was coping. And it wasn't good. What I saw wasn't good. But I thought my nursing practice was excellent. My patient didn't do without anything. They didn't do without anything. They had everything that I could get them within, you know, my means. But I knew there was something I was definitely not giving them, and that was it.
So you took stock?
Yes, I did take stock. Yeah. And would you believe I heard about, at this time, a hospice had opened in Sheffield. And there was this talk of death and dying and how it was going to be coped with, but it was going to be like the death house. And I thought, well, that might be convenient at times. And I just heard about it. And then I think, I'm just trying to remember now, I think I once went up and I knew of someone that had been admitted. I didn't know how it had happened, I didn't know what had happened, but it was somebody I knew, a patient of mine. And I don't know whether they went in the hospital and then were transferred or something. And I went up to see them. And I walked in and the place was marvellous and the staff seemed really nice. And I just saw this patient and she seemed really happy and content and she was okay and I was really pleased. Again, I wasn't able to say very much to her. I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to say because I thought, well, I think you're going to die in here. What do I say? So I left that aspect. I just talked about family and, you know, I was pleased that she was comfortable and then left it at that. And then the next thing I knew, a colleague that I'd worked with, Sheila Bellamy, in fact had been seconded, I heard from the district, to actually start interviewing via the hospice for patients for a new day unit that were going to open. Very revolutionary, really revolutionary, you know, like a terminal day hospital. I thought, God, that's novel for a start. Whatever are they going to do there?
So the hospice was St Luke's.
Yes, the hospice was St Luke's, and then a day hospital was going. But with this old colleague of mine that I'd worked alongside, and I knew was really almost like the right kind of person. I thought, oh, knowing Sheila, it could go the right way because she was very dynamic, very into that. She actually had some sadness in her life that she and I had discussed some years previously. She'd lost her first husband. So I almost thought she was very suitable anyway for the job because of the loss that she'd had. So I thought she'd be good. And, you know, I think life went on then along. I knew that she'd taken this post and they were opening this day hospital. And I don't know whether she and I met up at some time and we talked and she said, oh, we're looking for patients, etc. And I thought, oh, I have a super patient. I mean, she really talked to me about it. That was it. She came round and talked to people on the district about how it was going to work and what kind of patient they were looking for. Mm. And I'd got a perfect patient. I had an absolutely superb patient. And I thought, I knew with this patient and the daughter who cared for her that I could talk to them in the right kind of way and sell it. I just knew. Selling to the GP was a very different thing. He was dead set against it. I was working with a superb GP then, but he was, oh no, don't like that kind of thing. No, don't agree with it. I have sent a donation to Professor Wilkes because I really admire him, you know, but he said, I don't believe in all this fancy stuff with day hospitals and all this kind of thing. So I just said to him, please, can I approach this patient? So he said, well, I know you won't give me any peace till I say yes, so get on with it. So that was good. You see, I had this lovely relationship with this GP and the surgery. So off I toddled to this patient and daughter. And of course you've got to broach the thing is, well, it is this day hospital, but it's connected with the death house. So I thought, well, I'll try and term it a bit differently to that. So I can remember going round the houses saying, well, it's this really nice place. And they've got this day hospital and you can go and have a bath and have your hair done. And there's medical people there and the nurses are wonderful. And guess what? It's at St. Luke's. But anyway, apart from that, it's really nice. So I had this long spiel with mentioning, like, halfway through and then carrying on for a long time after they hoped they wouldn't notice it was St. Luke's.
And was that a common term,
Oh.
the death house?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was called?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
From when it opened?
Oh, yes.
Which was
yes.
which year?
Was it 73?
Yeah, I think so.
73?
Mm.
So, no, it's 71. Let's go back to 71 because it's 30 years this year. 71. I'm thinking of other times in my life. And so, much to my amazement, this patient and daughter said, oh, it sounds nice, and especially with you saying it's all right, you know, to go. And I said, oh, Jessie, you'd be able to get in the bath. You know, she hadn't been capable of getting in a bath for many years because of her disability and her cancer. So the daughter said, oh, and I kept saying to her, give you a day off, you know, you can go out to the shop, not worry about your mum. And I said these very positive things. Well, it was just a huge success. It was fantastic. So, I mean, then, of course, I was on the bandwagon then. I nipped round all the pet. Well, there were thousands queuing up, you know, just from me. I used to feel awful, really, because it was always, oh, God, another one from Gloria. But, you know, my patient, because I'd known Sheila and the background to things, I really thought it would work for my patients. And we got a nice little lot going. And they all loved it. So, really, I was sold as well. I thought, oh, it's great, this. And there were times I know Sheila would like visit this particular patient because there was a break, and she'd come and talk to the daughter, and the daughter always kind of would say things. Sheila Bellamy popped in today and we were talking, and she does seem to understand how I'm feeling, and I was thinking, well, I understand as well, but I didn't quite have that same expertise. I knew I hadn't. I knew there was something missing still. And then I heard about there was going to be a secondment from the district to St. Luke's. You could do a 6-month secondment. I mean, I didn't know anything about how that worked. I had no idea. I just knew you could go if you were. This was put up on a notice board. And ironically, Sheila rang me and said, have you heard about secondment to St. Luke's? So I said, oh yeah. I was quite surprised to hear from her, really. I saw her now and again. And she said, I think you're just the type of person that should apply. She said, would you think about it? So I said, oh, yes, I might. I don't know, because I was quite content with what I was doing, very fulfilled, no problems, totally, in control of my life, particularly working life, no problem. So I said, oh, right, and I just said, thanks very much, and cheer. And I was the little one, a little boy, and she was out with my kids, and was Tony all right? Just went, yes, family, things sort of, goodbye and farewell. Well, of course, I did go back then and have a look at what was down, and I thought, I'm going to give it a go, I'll go. Well, of course, I did go then. For an interview, I rang, and, an interview was arranged. Well, I walked in and saw the opposition, and I thought, well, I have no chance. Luckily, because I was very happy, so I wasn't unhappy with what I was doing. I loved what I was doing. And I'd got a superb SEN, superb. And she was frantic, thinking I might be going. And I said to her, I shan't be going anywhere, Well, after the interview...
Who was the opposition?
They were very senior nurses to me. I wouldn't like to name names. They were just very senior. And I thought, I've no chance, I didn't think they were better than me, by the way. I certainly didn't think that, but I thought, I have no chance, because looking at it. So, I had the interview, which was diabolical, and thought, and funny enough, I hope Miss Coburn never hears this, because she'd be mortified if she did, but the matron then, actually, much to my distress, really. I was very upset by this. Made a point that because I knew Sheila Bellamy, she knew that we had known each other, you know, that would not make any difference. And I was furious and said I would only ever get anything on my own merit, not on anybody else's. And then left, you know, that the interview was over. It was left on a very nice point, I thought. So, but I mean, it was just a comment made. I don't think Miss Coburn even realised she'd made it, but she did. And so I was able to go back that afternoon and say to husband and family, don't worry, I shall still be plodding on in the district in another 30 years, and ring my SCN and reassure her that the interview which had been a total disaster, so she'd not to worry, I would be with her forever. Thank you and goodbye. And Miss Coburn rang me at 6 and said they wished me to take the secondment. Well, I was flabbergasted, that was to say the least. I was flabbergasted. So I started the secondment for 6 months. Well, it just completely, it opened a new world. It just opened my eyes to so much. It opened me to so much. I just don't know, what to say now, but I just saw a different aspect of living and dying that I'd never experienced before. I heard people talk in a certain kind of way, and I can remember, Professor Wilkes was just unique, just an absolute darling of a man, wonderful. If I was to say anybody out of the 20th century for me, it must be Professor Wilkes. Blow Einstein, Professor Wilkes is a unique person. But there were other people, like I can remember once being alongside Tony Crowther, who then became the medical director after Professor Wilkes, and hearing him talk to a patient, or hearing him not talk to a patient, listening, waiting. Well, I'd never experienced that. I'd always talked a lot because that was my way. My way was, if somebody was talking about death, I went, anyway, I think I'm going to Blackpool this weekend. That was my way of coping. So I saw a different kind of situation altogether. I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing and hearing. And I saw a different approach to nursing, of course, of sitting by the bed, holding somebody's hand, sitting quietly. My thing was to bustle in. Now I'm here, love, to give you your enema, and I'm here to do something. I'll do your dressing, bustling in there, ever efficient nurse. I'd got to prove, that I was super efficient, and, etc., etc. But I just saw a different aspect, Michelle. It was just so different. And it just, of course I took stock again, didn't I? And I thought, I've been doing it wrong for years. I've been doing it atrociously for years. But guess what? I can do it better now. And of course, you had to do the MB course and then, spend the 6 months going out, to see patients, etc., etc. And interviewing them for the day unit. I'd gone along to work alongside Sheila to interview patients for the day unit. And time, went on, and I then had to go back onto the district after the 6 months secondment and, in fact, take my expertise out onto the district. And they were quite receptive, but, it was, of course, she's been sent, look, she knows it all now, and that's all right. Well, it wasn't that, I never came across that. But I was asked, lots of nurses who were far more far-thinking and wanting the best for their patients, like I did, would call, if they knew I was on late call, they'd ask if I could go to a particular patient because they were dying. And they knew I would say the right things to the relatives. And many times I was used then to go to patients and talk to relatives and suggest to patients who were frightened of St. Luke's, I could go in and, in between washing them and giving them an injection, I could say, I've been at St. Luke's for 6 months. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, it's lovely. Oh, they just do everything right. And that patient would end up going in because I'd talked to them. Now, nurses knew this, so they used me a lot in that capacity.
So that was the start of your moving out of the hospice to the people who were dying in their homes?
Yeah, well, yes, but I'd just gone back onto the district. My secondment finished. Yeah. But they did a reassessment or an evaluation of the service that was being offered from St. Luke's. And Sheila and I had both found that often when we went out to patients, Guess what happened? They were suitable for the day unit 3 days previously, but in between they died, or they were dying as we arrived. So you change tactics. I found that this was a vital lesson to me as well. I went in, I've come to see you about the day unit, love, to find them in bed dying. So I had to change to, well, darling, to the relative, what can we do? Is there any way we can help? Often they'd be very poorly medicated, so you'd ring the GP and say, Professor Wilkes usually at this stage would be giving diamorphine. The GPs were terrible at medicating. I mean, I can say that honestly. I would ask any GP of that time, did he think he was good? He wasn't, he was crap. Really, sorry. But that was the truth. They were very, very bad at medicating. But I'd learnt about medication. I'd learnt that if you gave diamorphine regularly, every 4 hours, guess what? People became pain-free. GPs would often give last-minute medication, diamorphine by injection, and people usually expired because they were so relieved to get some pain relief that they just expired very quickly. And when you had the old story of relatives would say, my husband died at the end of the needle, she was right, because they gave up then. So during this evaluation that was done, it was decided that we actually had gone out to see a lot of patients that actually needed pure support. That was the word that was being bandied about. Support. And Professor Wilkes actually rang me and said, I am getting funding from the Macmillan Fund for a further year. Would you be willing to come? So I said, well, why me? Because we're loads of it. He said, well, we just want you, we like you, so we want you to come back. He says, and you fit in and everything else, etc. Will you come back? So I said, God, I'd love to. And I didn't think then about career aspects, where I was going, what I was going to do. I just thought, I know I can do this job. I know I can make a difference. I have changed. I have altered. I have become whole. I felt that in myself. I thought, mind you, my God, I'd still a lot to learn. I had no idea really what it was all about. But I was saying to myself, I do know what it's about, really. I didn't. I'd still loads to learn. I mean, I'm still learning now, I must admit. So I went back and I was again seconded. The area weren't very happy. They thought I should still have been working on the district and flogging myself to death because they thought I would be having a lovely time at St. Luke's and enjoying all the lovely social aspects of St. Luke's, forgetting that I was travelling all over the city, working every hour that God sent. And Sheila and I at that time, because we were developing this service, we actually gave it our all. We gave it our all. We would go out in the middle of the night. We would go out early morning. We would go out late at night. We would go out mid-evening. If people were in trouble, the nurses knew that they could actually send for us, that if they were having problems, that we would listen. They would ring us up. I would often think, but they should be ringing the doctor, and they would end up ringing the doctor, and I would ring the doctor. But no, they just wanted to talk, and they knew we were approachable. They knew we would do anything. And because we were both well known from the district, that actually the nurses were the ones that we won the first. We had a lot of opposition at times because there were nurses that didn't know us and thought we were interfering and difficult, and that we were trying to show off and why did we know all this stuff about medication when they'd been doing quite a good job. But eventually, I think because of our attitude and how, and we had a lot of success stories, a lot of good things. There were a lot of failures as well, that we didn't do so well, and you felt terribly sad about those, but I don't think anything would have made difference in those instances. You just tried your best. But generally, we used the expertise of the hospice to relate to, and we would go back and ask Professor Wilkes, Dr. Crowther, what medication should we give? How often should it be given? What's the right dosage? I mean, we were sometimes not sure. So my secondment kept going on and on. Well, I just kept turning up. I kept walking through the door at St. Luke's and hoping they'd still, welcome me. And I was actually there for 16 years. I never wanted to move on to anything else. I totally destroyed any ambition I've got. And I just became a Macmillan nurse. I just totally... I was offered other jobs at times, and I didn't want to do them. I just wanted to do Macmillan nursing.
Would you like a break? Would you like a
No, I'm all
stop
right.
for you okay?
Yeah.
So, how did the Macmillan nursing come about then?
Well,
How did you actually get the title Macmillan Nurse?
well, I hope this is right. I'm sure it is. And I'm sure in years to come people will correct me. But it was because of, Douglas Macmillan, the first person to start National Society for Cancer Relief, as it was then called. And at first, at St Luke's, we were called kind of domiciliary sisters, liaison sisters, whatever. But then, because of the Macmillan tie-up, of that they would pay for our secondment and they would fund for so many years, it was a very complex situation. I never got too involved with that. I just know that they would pay for so many years, then they were asked again to pay for so many more years, or whatever. And they decided then to use the title, in our title, the honorary title of Macmillan. And that's how it really all started.
And how many Macmillan nurses were there when you started?
I'm not really sure. I would have to really find that out from the archive, to be truthful. But we were amongst the first few. We definitely were. Sheila would be amongst the very first, and then I, followed on from that. But at first we didn't probably use the title. Because I don't think the title was there then. I think simply, the Macmillan Fund provided money, but they weren't particularly using the name. And then suddenly, guess what? We were Macmillan Nurses. And then there was a huge kind of publicity type machine got into gear of be a Macmillan nurse. Come out, and well, we've been one of them for a few years, I think. It just seemed to develop, just an ongoing development.
Can you tell me something about the drugs that were being given for pain relief in those early days of the hospice, St Luke's Hospice?
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll think about how they might have changed as
Well,
as we move
I
on.
think then there is...
Okay, we're back. So you told me about drugs. Perhaps you could tell me something about how much technology was coming into palliative care at the time.
Well, there were a lot of new equipment occurred to make life more tolerable for people with terminal diseases. Some things we like pressure cushions. I can say just something as simple as that. There was a thing called the row hold cushion, which was really quite amazing. That was very helpful. But I think the most technological thing for us at that time was the advent of the syringe driver. It was quite phenomenal, really, because it was a subcutaneous, like a subcutaneous needle that you put under a patient's skin, attached to a very small driver, like a pump almost, and it gave a constant 24-hour infusion. And I remember we had initially lots of problems because we used the wrong drugs sometimes. Because it was so new, not everybody was sure about sometimes what drugs to use. And I don't care who produced the certain drugs that were okay or didn't produce them or whatever, but mistakes were made at times. I think it's like with everything, you realise that you got crystallisation with certain things, and there was certain drugs that you just shouldn't use. But the drugs that you did use were very, very effective, and they were quite astounding to us. And again, we had to sell things like that. We really had to sell them to the community. We'd seen them tried at St Luke's, and they seemed pretty successful. At times, they didn't quite work as they should do, but it's like everything that's new. It's probably just not right at that particular time, or patient's skin could be difficulties with. But generally, the sites found were very appropriate, and we managed all right, and they really were successful. But we had one or two hair-raising situations initially. And I can remember even nurses on the district, when they first started to use them, I can remember being called out once at 1 o'clock in the morning because they'd kind of stuck. Nothing to do with us, but they knew that we were experts, so they thought, oh, can we disturb at this time of night? And they actually, would ring us because they knew that Sheila and I would not shout, would not bellow them out. We would simply say, well, try this, try the other, or we'll come out and have a look ourselves. So often that was done because that was the kind of service we gave. We wanted to give that kind of service. Might be nothing to do with it. We might never have even seen the patient, but we would still go out. I don't suppose we were supposed to, but we did it. And that was a fact of life.
How long had you been in hospice work before the syringe driver came into?
Oh, it's a few years. Now I would forget, but it was, I think, 5 or 6 years, I think, before it came. I don't even know the year. They just turned up, and we just used them.
And what impact did it make on your nursing?
Well, it made it busier for a while, because we educated every district nurse on the district how to use them. So they all came for lectures over a period of time, so that they would gain expertise in using the syringe driver. The fact that, well, initially we first put them up. We put the first few up ourselves and handled them ourselves from the hospice. We left them with patients and then simply went and redid the syringes the next day, because they were so new. We educated GPs as well. Lots of GPs didn't know about using the syringe driver. They had no idea. They were just new technology. They didn't want to use them. They just thought, oh no, they wouldn't work. We had to really sell them. I remember going out to a lady who was having a terrible vomiting problem, dreadful vomiting problem, and this had been persistent for some days, just horrendous. And I thought the answer was, I linked with St Luke's, and I thought the answer really was, a syringe driver. I talked to the GP about it. She was very, very reluctant to even give it a go. So I just said, well, I could only leave her to think about it. She said, tell you what, she said, come down to the surgery and sell it to me. So I went down to the surgery. I told her what drugs we could put in, an antiemetic mainly. The lady hadn't a pain problem, she had just a sickness problem. So it was more an antiemetic we were talking about at the time. And I went down, I showed her the syringe driver, I showed her how simple and uncomplicated it was, how easily the drugs could be given. It was a 24-hour thing. She didn't have to change it. In fact, a nurse could change it. It didn't involve a doctor because it was a subcutaneous thing. And it absolutely sold. She just said, go up this afternoon, can you get the drugs? And I said, yes, I can get them from St Luke's. Then, you see, we just went and got things from St Luke's. I mean, we just went and stole things. And it was all right, it just worked. You know, that was what we did. And I went back to this patient. That patient died sickness-free in 48 hours. Calmed everything down. You can imagine that GP used syringe drivers ever after that. There was never a problem. If I used to say to her, do you think a syringe driver would be the answer? Every patient that I ever then saw for her, she would use a syringe driver on if it was appropriate. No failures with that. People like that. They just. So we did. We educated GPs, all kind of medical personnel. We would go and lecture to GPs, go to surgeries to talk about them, this new technology, and it was brilliant. You know, it just.
Were they easy to get hold of? Were they fairly inexpensive?
No, they seemed costly, so they were quite hard to get to acquire. But eventually, this particular lady that I'd been involved with, the husband didn't. After she died, he was really grateful. He realised this little machine. He was an engineer, so he really looked at the machine and he said, it's a simple pump. He said, it's so simple how it works. I can't believe it. He said, it's fantastic. He said, a simple little thing like that has made my wife's last 2 days wonderful. He said, it's phenomenal. So he asked all his family and friends, would they give money to buy a syringe driver instead of flowers. And in fact, we bought 2 with the money he raised. So we would often do things. We actually got our own little set of syringe drivers to loan out to the district, and we did that for a while, for some years, that we just loaned them out to the district, and then the district began to realise the revolutionary thing they were doing, and in fact began to acquire some themselves, and they would get patients, buying them, and relatives buying them. So that was really good.
So, how have you managed to cope with your very hectic working life and your growing family?
Oh, I know. Oh, dear. Well, I started at St Luke's as my boys were growing up a bit. They both... I always made them... They were always aware of sick people. They were always aware that I managed sick people, that I helped sick people. They'd been alongside me at the school with sick children, so they were ever so much aware. My parents and my mum-in-law, again, were very aware that what I was doing was helpful to a lot of people, that my job, in fact, ended up by helping a lot of people. And they were very aware that I made people more comfortable, that they died with dignity, because we often discussed this and would talk about. And as we were generally discussing things, that if I'd been to a patient, I mean, obviously there was confidentiality, which they appreciate, but I would say that somebody had died very peacefully and been very tranquil. And I think it pleased my parents that I was saying the right things as far as they were concerned, that people were dying with dignity. That's what I would say. My husband, poor soul, bless his heart, he's just always been fantastic, really. He's known the need within me. He's known it. He's known that I've been very adamant about what I wanted to give to people, what I knew they needed. He's always been there behind me saying, you can do it. He never underestimated, I think, what I did or what I could do. He was always, yes, you can do that. And so when I was thinking about doing certain jobs, although I would have reservations, Tony wouldn't. No, I know you can do it. You'll be all right. You just give it a go. Give it a go. Give it a go. And he always, when I was sometimes at my lowest, and you'd come home and think, oh, I must be careful what I say because I don't want to burden them. He would always be very aware, and he wouldn't mind being burdened. He would say, let it go, let it out and talk about it. So he was very supportive, really. And my boys just grew up with that. One went into nursing, I think, probably because of that. I would hope, anyway.
Did he go into general nursing?
He did, and then he went into psychiatric nursing as well. And has always worked in healthcare. He's always worked in some allied things to healthcare. So, yeah, he's done very well. And
have you found, have there been any instances over the years where you've used your skills outside of a professional or a working life setting, away from the hospice?
You mean even with family?
Yeah, with
and
family.
Friends. Oh, yes, yes. Oh, I mean, the neighbours have always rung me. Friends have always rung me. There's been nothing to do with work. People have always rung me. Somebody will have said, Gloria Day, she knows about things like that, so you ring her. Loads of people over the years I've helped a lot, to talk to and explain things to, and many times. Nothing to do with work at all. People have just known who I was, or even when we've gone to, for a lot of time we received cheques from pubs we used to go out, she and I, in the very early days, when St Luke's was very, very early. And we used to be asked to go and receive cheques because of the Macmillan Fund, etc, etc, etc. And even I've had people come up to me in the pub, whatever, club, whatever, and ask me. I've had people ring me. Somebody's given my number to them because they saw me receiving a cheque and they thought I looked all right and that I wouldn't mind if I rang them about the mother. Endless for that my husband has had to take, sort out, say I'll be in at a certain time, she won't be in, don't worry, she'll contact you. That has always, it's never just been involved with work, never. Even now, even after retirement, I will still get people phoning me. What shall I do? Who should I contact? Is this the right way to go about it? So it's nice that you've been able, that I've been able to do that, to still carry on.
Yeah, you just. I know that you were called on the day of the Hillsborough disaster. Would you mind telling me about that, or if you don't want to?
Well, I actually realised there was a problem, and we went down there immediately, and we went to the resource centre and we just sat with relatives.
So you went voluntarily? Yes.
Yeah. we sat, Sheila and I, with relatives and talked to them for a long time. And then things were seeming to be handled. And I can't just remember in what context, but we had a little break and there were some buses lined up. And we realised things were being taken care of, and we felt we'd done our bit. We felt we'd really, worked quite hard. There were lots of people around, and we did our bit with all the relatives and everything. But we went. I don't know whether the policeman didn't say there was a lot of upset on these buses, etc.
This was when they were trying to get people home.
Yeah, they were trying to get. Yeah, it was really tough. So we went onto the buses, Sheila and I, and we talked. And of course, people were very frantic. There were no lines out of Sheffield at that time. They were all busy. It was really a very, very, how I suppose, panic-stricken time, obviously, because of what was happening, and they were trying to get people bussed out and get them home. So Sheila and I, there were quite a lot of young men, and they were all crying and terribly distressed. And we were then heading for home, we thought, but we'd stop just to speak to them because we could see, the policeman, there's a lot of people distressed on this bus, will you come and talk to them? So we took numbers from them and said, just give us your mum's phone number or anybody's phone number. So we took a whole list because we said, we're going out of the area. We can phone and let your mums know that you're on your way, but you will be shortly.
And they were going back to...
So they were going back to Liverpool. So we did that, went back to Sheila's and just dialed every number that we got on the list, much to, the amazement of the people who answered the phones, who were very grateful. We actually, I think, shortly after that, had a lovely letter in the paper saying to the people who'd phoned to thank them. And then Sheila knew some people in Liverpool, and they'd actually had, I don't know, there was somebody that they were involved with who said how grateful these people were. So that was nice, we were able to do that. And then, I can't remember Miss Coburn, or we said we'd be happily stand by at the Royal Hallamshire the next day because we knew people would be coming to view bodies and things. And in fact, we just stood by and directed people if they wanted to go and if they wanted to talk. But it was all very well organised. We didn't have to do a lot, but we were there. We were there if needs be.
Well, there are many people from the hospice or that sort of background, bereavement care.
I think Anne Burdett, another colleague of mine, was there, but no, I don't think so. I don't remember. I can't remember. I think Miss Coburn came with us to the Royal Hallamshire because that's when we met Mrs. Thatcher, who was charming.
Go and tell me about Mrs. Thatcher.
Oh, she was gorgeous. She was just lovely.
Why
Terribly concerned. Obviously, her concern was for people that had lost their lives and relatives, but she did come across and thank us for the fact that we were trying to help, and that's all we could just say. Well, we just tried to have it. We did very little as it turned out, but we did and that it was just left at that.
So did she visit at the time of the disaster?
The following day, we saw the following day at the hospital. She'd come to see anybody that was being admitted to hospital. She came to talk to them.
What's your impression of the whole event? What time did you arrive?
I can't remember. No idea. I knew it was happening, and we just drove down. I just rang Sheila and said, we need to be at this place. We need to be there. So it'd be shortly afterwards, really. Probably may have been, what, at 4, and then we came back very late at night. It was just immense. I can just remember looking at some parents, and nobody could tell them anything because obviously bodies hadn't been identified or whatever. And the sheer anguish that we saw, and we just sat and just, if they wanted to talk, we talked. If they didn't, we didn't. But the sheer anguish of that day was just truly horrendous, I thought. I just don't know how people cope, really. But then again, you see, I felt that with Sheila and I, we had an expertise that we could give. That was something else. I knew that whatever question I was asked, I would be able to answer. That sounds awful, doesn't it? Probably not every question. But you knew you could say the right things, or you would hope you would say the right things, because you'd had some training. It was a bad day, though, that.
That was about 10 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
A bit longer. So after that, this was when did you retire?
1994.
1994. So you had another 5 years or so to
Oh
go.
yes, yes, yeah. Oh yes, yeah.
So in those last years of your working life, what sort of changes would you say had taken place during your career? What was it like at the end as opposed to the beginning of
at the very beginning.
Yeah, thinking just about the way in the care of the dying and...
Tremendous changes in the care of the dying, yes, without doubt. Whereas it before, when I first started training, it was secretive, not to be talked about. People seemed afraid, to put the feelings on the line. With the event of the hospice movement and the training that I got in the subsequent years, very, very different. I would honestly say I could go into anybody now and not be afraid to confront them, or for them to confront me, whichever way it worked, about death and dying. I'm no longer afraid. And that's the difference. I was afraid. I was afraid to talk to people. I was afraid that I would say the wrong... If now I learned that if you say the wrong thing, you say to them, I've said the wrong thing. You're actually not afraid to admit that you've blundered, that you've made a cock-up. I've always said that to people. And they know me, they know my Yorkshire accent. That was the one thing that always won patients for me. The minute they heard my accent, I came from the city that they lived in. And that's been what my big bonus in life is. I am one of them. And if I said to them, darling, I've made a right cock up of that, they knew what I was trying to say. I mean, I wouldn't say that to the Lord Lieutenant of Yorkshire or anything, and the Duchess of Devonshire. I wouldn't actually, although I've met her on a number of occasions. She's absolutely lovely, bless her heart. I wouldn't obviously use that kind, but to good, solid Sheffield people. They know what you're saying. And that's what I learnt then. I learnt to be unafraid of death and dying. That, to bring things out into the open, to share with people, and to know as well when to not say something, when it wasn't appropriate. It doesn't always work, Michelle. You don't always do it right. You often do it wrong. But I recognise now that I do it wrong, or I've done it wrong, and I can say I've done it wrong. That's something that I've learned. At 18 you don't know about. You're far too young to know about death. And what relevance has it to you? You ain't going to die forever, And of course you lose family members, don't you? You lose dear friends. And that is another little experience in your life that makes you learn to cope.
Has the philosophy, in your opinion, changed of the hospice movement?
Yes.
Since it started? Or since you came into it? Sorry.
No, I think it stayed very much the same, hasn't it? I don't think it's changed. It's just educated a lot more people into the philosophy. And that can only be good, can't it? That more people... No, I don't think it's changed. I think people like Cicely Saunders, Professor Eric Wilkes, have all had a belief, and they've carried that belief forward, and they've educated a lot of other people. I mean, the education is ongoing, isn't it, about the philosophy? So that can only be good, can't it, really?
And what's about retirement? What do you do these days?
Brilliant. Fantastic. How did I find time to work? It's funny because we often say, we did such strange hours, Sheila and I, in the very beginning. We broke all the rules. We were given carte blanche to do exactly as we wished by Professor Eric Wilkes and obviously other people like the matron of the time and Tony Crowther. And we just knew we had something to give. We knew that. So we gave it. We gave 24 hours if need be, 24-hour course, etc. So to come away from that, I thought, God, I'm going to be so bored and, I've so much time on my hands. How foolish was that? Because, now I just am so busy. But I I still work as a volunteer at St Luke's, which I love. I do bereavement visiting, which I'm just taking a short break from at the moment because of circumstances within my family. I have 4 grandchildren. I've got a husband, ever patient still. That we try and spend time together. I have a lot of friends, and we do walking. We have a lot of interest. So I'm never stuck for Well, I'm stuck for time because I want more of it. I think, where does it go? You know, it's really terrible.
And how often are you back at St Luke's volunteering?
I go every week, once a week. Yeah, work on the coffee bar, which I always said I would. I wanted to really reach the height of my career and go from Macmillan nurse to coffee bar lady. And I always thought that's when I really have made it, which I love. I really do enjoy that. Again, I'm meeting patients, relatives, nurses. It's wonderful. You know, I'm still seeing people that I feel, as I'm serving them their cup of coffee, I'm serving them a bit of compassion as well and understanding. It's still there. That doesn't change, and it's lovely. I mean, I'm utterly selfish because I always say it fulfills me. I'm totally selfish in that aspect, that it fulfills me, and that's, you know.
And for the future, do you intend to carry on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, we've talked about, you know, the project, the history project, that I would like to go and interview some patients for, and that would be really nice. Oh, I see myself working even on the coffee bar for a number of years. Yeah, I don't see myself letting that go because I enjoy it. It's really, and it's good for my husband and I to have time apart. You know, it brings a freshness to our relationship. And he still supports me. He's still very happy for me to do things like that, to be my own person. And that's really probably what it's all about at the end of the day, that you still want to be yourself.
I think that's a good point on which to draw things
Thank
to
you.
a close. So thank you very much.
Pleasure, love.